for their arrangement, and that's sort of the common DNA of the middle school that allows for collaborative teams. So if we'll go to the next school, the Timberline Middle School. I really enjoy this. I really enjoy this example as well. Again, this is the vestige of the old double-loaded corridor. What they've done is they've grouped 5 academic spaces. Here's one, here's another, here's another, here's another. There are 4 clusters of 5 academic spaces, and they've run them perpendicular to the main corridor. They've created a new corridor, and they have splayed that, which makes it a usable resource space. What is probably almost impossible to see from the back of the room is this picture that shows what that resource space looks like. That's this space right here where kids can go out and do team learning, small group instruction, individual instruction, and it's accessed by glass overhead garage doors that open up. So you can go directly from your classroom into this space. What's important about that? The glass is important because students know that they can be observed. If they know that they can be observed, they are much less prone to misbehave. I learned this the hard way. One of the first designs I did had a gymnasium addition added to another gymnasium, and it was connected through a corridor that served a locker room and a weight room. And the weight room door lasted on average about 5 or 6 months. See, the students understood they couldn't be seen. And in the weight room, you know, they were working on their muscles, and the door gave them a test of how well their muscles were developing. And so it took active surveillance. It took a camera before students stopped vandalizing the door. Next slide, please. This is a similar concept, the Herget Middle School, another great design where you see, again, the clusters of academic spaces here and here grouped around common resource areas. Now these common resource areas, go ahead and go to the next slide, provide a variety of academic opportunities from large group instruction and small group instruction. And similarly, these activity spaces are accessed through operable glass overhead doors. Next slide, please. How large is the Herget Middle School? I don't have the exact square footage. I'm going to guess, looking at it, that it's 65, 70,000 square feet, but let us verify that. Pardon me? Oh, the number of students? That I don't know. I'll have to get that for you. Next slide, please. This is the, if you'll back up one, the Silvis Middle School, which is in design right now. This is a great facility. In our planning, the school district wanted to recognize that schools will have a bigger role in fighting the obesity epidemic that is plaguing America now. So at the very entrance is a wellness center featuring a climbing wall and a nutrition center. Another important component of this design was what we call the unlibrary, and that was a library that extended beyond the bounds of the stacks. So it would allow folks to take resources and study materials into a central public space as part of the library. And then finally, what you'll see at the bottom is a very flexible environment allowing for project-based learning, learning by doing, learning with your hands. So we have the option of using the traditional lecture classroom arrangement or opening this up to larger hands-on learning spaces. So it creates an enormously creative or flexible environment. Next slide. The other trend that we want to touch upon, I don't think any trends presentation could avoid talking about security. We live in the post-Columbine era, and architects, school architects, understand the need to provide entry control among other things. And so a typical response to this is shown in this design, where students, after students arrive at school, the interior doors of a vestibule lock. And so anyone who comes into the school cannot have direct access into the school. They are forced, channeled through the office where they must register before they have access to the rest of the school. I call that the post-Columbine entry sequence, and that's just one of the considerations of school security. Next slide, please. This is the West Point Junior High School. It is a middle school organized as 3 houses around a common collaboration space, which is what you see there. It's a grand space. If you go to the next slide, each of the houses has conference rooms and faculty planning areas. In the left, what you see, upper left, is a faculty planning area. You see, a teacher working in isolation doesn't have the opportunities to meet the needs of every child as well as teachers that work collaboratively. Next slide, please. And I mentioned that you can use these concepts in the incorporation of remodeling and new additions. This is the Williamsville Junior High. What you see here is a facility before the project. The district loved this facility, wanted to make sure that it remained a part of the overall concept. You can see through the lower left that the new addition created a brand new facility, a brand new space from an old place, gave new life to this existing building, and provide a new instructional resource center as well as entry control. Next slide. Talking about high schools now, the very first one that I want to show is, next slide. This is called the School of the Future. It's a collaboration, a business partnership, as Frank mentioned, as one of the trends, between the Microsoft Corporation and the Philadelphia School District. It was a technology-based instruction curriculum that was meant to be replicatable, if that's a word, around the world. It featured a number of innovative things. Students carried laptops, as you might expect, and messages were broadcast live across their laptops. It was an almost paperless environment. Students received streaming media content from media experts. Teachers had virtual teaching assistants. Teachers could go ahead and observe students' progress during the class, during the educational time. Next slide, please. This is the Frisco Center Career and Technical Education Center. And what this is real-world environment meets educational program. This is for college-bound and career-bound 11th and 12th graders as they prepare for their future. It features, as I mentioned, real-world environments, a full-service restaurant, a courtroom for mock trials, and you can see the Culinary Institute on the lower right. Next slide, please. This is the Zionsville High School. This was a space that originally wasn't a school. It was remodeled to work as a school. And it's an open environment that is separated by furniture, by different height partitions. This provides a lot of flexibility for rapid reconfiguration of space. This is featured in an article in School Planning and Management, and one of the things they note that with a simple coat of what they call idea paint, any surface can turn into a whiteboard. Next slide, please. This is an Institute of Technology, and if you could read the first word, you would know why I'm not going to try and pronounce it. I don't know how it's pronounced. It's a design based on project-based learning, meaning hands-on application for each of those areas. I call it project-based learning on steroids. This is as far out as you're going to find. And then the next slide shows that the interior environment is equally forward-thinking, if you'd like to say it that way. It definitely conveys the technical and futuristic nature of this space. Next slide. This is the Fossil Ridge High School. This is another high-performance school. I hope you can see on the lower right are the photovoltaic panels that help produce some of the energy consumed by this building. The upper right shows light shelves, and then the left shows the interior educational environment and how it benefits from the use of natural daylight, which also allows us to reduce our reliance on artificial lighting. Next slide, please. This is an example of how these concepts can be incorporated into a building that's remodeled or has expansions to it. This is the Mahomet Seymour High School. The picture on the upper right is what it looked like before. I call it a warehouse for learning. And the bottom picture shows what it looks like after remodeling. The plan shows that program shortages were addressed by adding building additions. Next slide, please. I know it's been a long meeting, so I'm going to just go through these very quickly. And I want you to get the sense of what new educational environments feel like. Next slide. This is the Little Valley Lawndale High School. It's a community arts center, and it's a